Monkey.
Andy Ruiz Jr. defeats Luis Ortiz via unanimous decision. So for Luis Ortiz in this fight, I felt like he needed to do his homework. We all know that Andy Ruiz Jr. is a front foot counter puncher. He relies on volume punches from his opponents, and he essentially tries to beat his opponent to a punch. You'll throw a punch and Ruiz will bank on his hand speed and hope that he hits you before you hit him. So that's why Ruiz also tries to figure out his distance as well. Ruiz also loves it when you throw those sloppy punches, those sloppy jabs with no mustard on it, with no intention of really hitting through the opponent, of pushing your opponent back. He will come over the top with a hook or a straight, and it will be extremely fast. And we've seen from this fight that Andy Ruiz is a big puncher. And whilst I do think Andy Ruiz now is probably a top 5 puncher in the division, Luis Ortiz's chin is gone. He doesn't have the punch resistance. He took a lot of damage in the first Deontay Wilder fight and also the second Deontay Wilder fight. So his chin is not quite able to hold up. I thought with the second knockdown, that maybe it was a little bit harsh to rule it as a knockdown, and I'll have to watch it again to be honest, because I thought that maybe Ruiz was pulling Ortiz down. But yeah, Ortiz got knocked down 3 times in the fight. Though, it was a kind of fight where not much was happening, and then Ruiz would just hit Ortiz, and Ortiz will kind of be shocked. I felt like when Ortiz wasn't being pressured heavily by Ruiz and Ruiz wasn't throwing a lot of volume, Ortiz was winning the fights in spots in terms of he was boxing well and he was winning some rounds. I thought the 10th, 11th, and 12th rounds he boxed well, especially in the 10th round. He was tagging Andy Ruiz Jr., hitting him with a lot of straight shots, a lot of backhands, and he was pinning Ruiz's head back. But Ruiz is very persistent, and Ruiz has a granite chin. I mean, if we're talking about chins at the top level in the heavyweight division, we talk about Usyk and Tyson Fury. I think Andy Ruiz possibly has the best chin in the heavyweight division. He's someone who's just very, very hard to knock down, and he's got that kind of, I don't know, that big neck that I guess just absorbs punches very well. But yeah, Ruiz is a fighter who he's got a fantastic chin. It takes a lot to knock Andy Ruiz down and keep Andy Ruiz down. He's not being knocked out. And again for Ortiz, Ortiz looks a little bit slow, a little bit methodical. You can tell that Luis Ortiz has aged a little bit. I feel like the Ortiz that fought Deontay Wilder in the second fight, and definitely the Ortiz that fought Wilder in the first fight, would have probably put in a better showing against Andy Ruiz Jr. That being said, Ruiz needs to keep working on his defense because he was getting hit too much for my liking. He needs to have a tighter guard and not let punches through as easily as he does sometimes. And I feel like maybe he's confident that, I can get to this guy, and he feels that, he just wants to essentially bait his opponent in to throw punches so he can throw his own punch. But you don't have to do that all the time. I feel like Andy Ruiz does that excessively. He waits for his opponent's punches, and if his opponent isn't throwing much, yeah, he's not active enough, Andy Ruiz. And it may help if he trims off a bit more body fat from the midsection and he's able to bend at the waist a little bit more and he's able to go down to the body. I suspect Andy Ruiz Jr. has some discipline issues. He was mentioning before, at least in the build-up to this fight, that, going into the Chris Arreola fight, he was worried about, looking the part and so on and so forth, and he wasn't focusing as much on the technical aspects of boxing, and he essentially used that as a reason to why he struggled somewhat in the Arreola fight and maybe why he got knocked down, him feeling a little bit weaker. And whilst Ruiz's body composition has changed a little bit, he looks like he's put on a little bit more muscle and pulled off a little bit more fat. He can still be a lot leaner than he is. And if Andy Ruiz drops several more pounds, especially just remove a lot more body fat, he's going to be able to do more. He's going to be able to bend out the waist. He's going to be able to avoid shots and be more active. He's going to be a more dangerous fighter. So it's not necessarily about, you know, getting leaner to look the part. It's about being leaner to be a more functional fighter. So I feel like Andy Ruiz Jr., you know, he's got to pull more weight off whether he likes it or not. He can't use, you know, feeling weaker as an excuse. You know, it takes time. Your body takes time to adjust to being lighter. It can be uncomfortable at times. But if you want to be the best fighter you can be, you've got to make sacrifices and you've got to work hard and you've got to be disciplined. So Ruiz can still improve in my opinion. That's the thing. Andy Ruiz, in my opinion, hasn't fully reached his potential. And that's not necessarily because he hasn't had learning fights. He has had learning fights. It's just because that he hasn't maximized himself in terms of physically speaking. He's limiting himself coming in so heavy. You know, he's 6'3". He shouldn't be anywhere near the 260s or the 270s or the 280s. That's just ridiculous. He needs to, realistically, he shouldn't be heavier than 250. You know, he's 6'3". He's considered a shorter heavyweight in modern times. So yeah, Andy Ruiz, he can still improve a lot more. It was a decent performance, but you know, apart from the knockdowns, he was getting outboxed in spots, but it's just his speed and his punching power. You know, very, very good from Andy Ruiz in that aspect. Ortiz's chin, you know, his punch resistance has regressed, so that's what I noted from Luis Ortiz. And we kind of seen it in the Charles Martin fight. He's a lot more slower now, Luis Ortiz. But we've got to give Luis Ortiz credit because he showed a lot of heart in this fight. He could have easily quit, but he decided to carry on. So respect to Ortiz, respect to Ruiz. It was a fantastic fight. Hopefully, Ruiz's next fight will be against someone like a Deontay Wilder. If Deontay Wilder beats, if he beats Robert Helenius, then I suspect he will fight Ortiz next. They're both on the PBC, so it shouldn't be too hard to make. So yeah. Alright guys, let me know in the comment section below what you thought of this fight. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm almost at 300 subs, so if you guys can help me get to 300 subs, that would be much appreciated. Alright, peace.